Aloha and welcome. My name is Jeff James and I'll be the host of today's show, The Military in Hawaii. The show today will be about the evolving role of the reserves and the contributions that citizen soldiers make in Hawaii. My guest is retired Navy Captain Neil Sheehan, CEO and President of the Sheehan Group. Neil, welcome and thanks for being here.
Thank you, Jeff.
Neil, I'd like to ask a little bit about your naval career. Now, this show is about the reserves and the contribution of citizen soldiers. And to be clear, when I say soldier, I mean soldier in the Army, Coast Guardsman, Marine, Airman, or sailor. So I'll use the generic term soldier. But I know that you spent some time on active duty in the Navy, and then you balanced out your career as a reservist or a citizen soldier. So why don't you share a little bit about what you did in the Navy?
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Well, I joined right out of law school. I wanted to get trial experience, and sure enough, my very first day at the law office in Norfolk, I was wearing the right uniform of the day. They threw me into the courtroom before I met my commanding officer. So I asked for it and I got it. From there, Norfolk was, I think, the largest law office the Navy had at the time. And so when there's special duties like going to Bahrain for 6 months, I did that. And then the first Gulf War broke out and I pretty much stayed. I came back, changed clothes, and went back over pretty much. So I was over there for 16, 17 months. And then I did a couple of years in Antarctica. We called ourselves the Frozen Chosen. And then the Navy said I allowed me to go back to their law school in Newport. And I taught new junior officers and enlisted. And then they sent me for a graduate school degree, and I came back. My payback was to come to Hawaii, and so that's how I ended up here, as a payback for another degree.
So you're a JAG.
JAG.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it like TV?
Just like it. Last time I was on the space shuttle. Yeah. No, it's sensationalized, but they've got a little bit of truth built into the show.
Well, at what point in your career did you transition into the reserves, and what drove you to do that?
Well, all told, I think we moved, about 8 different homes in 13 years. I did about 13 years active, and my wife just fell in love with Hawaii. So, and my boys were in that elementary school age, and I had to weigh family life versus service, and I chose my family, and we stayed. And my boys were able to stay in the same school and have some normalcy. And that's when I made the transition to the reserves.
So while you were in the reserves, did you still serve as a JAG, or did you do any other type of duties?
I was a JAG, mostly at short time at PAC Fleet, and then majority of the time at U.S. Pacific Command with 2 years as a reservist commanding officer here locally.
Oh, great. Awesome. So as a JAG, what type of law did you practice while you were a reservist? Did you practice law as a civilian as well?
As a civilian, I went more into large architect engineering companies supporting Department of Defense, so on the environmental side. My specialty is environmental law.
Okay, great.
So I did a lot of environmental work for the Navy, in particular in the Pacific and in Hawaii. But outside of wearing the uniform, I didn't practice law all that much.
Well, that's kind of a natural fit, though, if you decided to stay here in Hawaii doing environmental law, because the environment here is pristine and there's a lot of effort towards preserving it. So that makes a lot of sense. Let me ask you though, as a JAG, I've watched the shows, I've seen A Few Good Men, all the good JAG shows, the TV shows and the movies and stuff like that. Did you have any experiences like that, or what would you consider to be your most exciting experience that you came across, either on active duty or as a reservist?
There's moments of levity, and there were serious moments, and but also, at least one case where it really took the world stage. So I start off with the levity. When I was a junior officer in Norfolk, Virginia, I was both a trial counsel, meaning a prosecutor, and then I finished that tour and I became a defense counsel. So the Navy wanted you to have both sides of the courtroom, and so you could appreciate it as you become a more senior officer. You can relate to the junior officers, what they're going through. But as a defense counsel, I had a client, I'll leave his name out of it, but he kept calling in bomb threats into the squadron there at Naval Air Station. And NCIS, they were called NIS back then, figured out that the bomb threats came in right before the Boston Celtics were on TV. So this kid was from Boston. He wanted to get out of duty. He called in a bomb threat and go watch the game. It's serious.
Sure.
It really was disruptive, but he's a young kid and made a mistake, and
Yeah,
he
probably
ended up
wouldn't
paying
go
for
over so well today.
No,
Yeah.
no, not at all, right?
Yeah. Well, that's part of what we wanted to talk about, which was the evolving role that the reservists play. Now, when I came in the Navy back in the early 80s, the first ship I was on had recently been redesignated as a Naval Reserve Force ship. So we did all the stuff that a regular active duty ship would do, but we also had the added benefit of a reserve detachment being assigned to us. And I say that kind of tongue in cheek because that was not actually a benefit. We would, one weekend every month, the reservists would show up on a Friday, and we'd have to go to sea over the weekend while the rest of our active ships, in port were off on liberty, we were going to sea. And the thing that really irked me at the time was, they didn't actually do any contribution to the ship. It was the regular crew. We got the ship underway, we operated the ship, and they kind of hung out and, stood under instruction watches and things like that. So I didn't really have a good feeling about what they were doing, and it didn't seem to me that they were making a contribution, but, advanced the clock 30 years, and I think that's really changed significantly the contribution that the reserves make. So can you touch on that a little bit? Has that been your observation?
Yeah, Jeff, when I first joined, I had a similar experience, but mine was shoreside in a building. They would show up on a weekend, and very senior, seasoned attorneys, older guys that are captains, a lot of experience, but we didn't have any work for them. So literally, they'd come in, PT, do exercise, read the newspaper, and there wasn't much contribution. Fast forward post 9/11, my experience has been, if you go up on a watch at U.S. Pacific Command in the middle of the night, like I had sat, dozens and dozens of watches up there, 95% of them are reservists. I pulled a couple of stats prepping for today. I think there's about 108 reservists, 108,000 reservists, and over 50,000, over half of them have combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. So it's about 20% of the fighting force right now in DoD, and it has changed. They're being thrown into the fight.
Yeah, that's interesting because I think that's been my observation as well. I mean, I've got a bunch of friends that are reservists, and I have to say I think they deployed more than I did. I mean, those guys,
right.
They paid the price, but that's what we had the reserve force for, is essentially to kind of be the 9/11 force.
That's right.
To pull out because, I think we learned 40 years ago when we got rid of the draft, we disbanded it, and the all-volunteer force has been adequate to defend our nation. And when you supplement it with the reserve force and also the National Guard, I'll tie them in as well.
Yeah, very important
They
part.
they make a huge contribution, so I think it's important.
And along that point, and using 9/11 as an example, there's no time to then go out and train the reservists. When an incident happens, they have to be trained. So it's like a firefighter. You hope it doesn't, you hope there's no fire, but when there is, you don't have time to train it, how to put it out. You've got to be ready to go. And then the reservists do spend a lot of time training as well.
Yeah, so that brings up another really interesting point, and that's the concept of the citizen soldier. So the reservist oftentimes is termed the citizen soldier. At times you're just a regular civilian citizen. At other times you're in the military doing the military piece. So what's that like trying to strike that balance? Because you have to train, you have to be prepared, but you also have a private life that you're trying to run, and whether you're in business or irrespective of what your civilian occupation is. You've got a family, so what are the trials and tribulations that you find trying to balance the military side with your civilian side?
I can talk to my personal experience. Reservists, they say, 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year. It's not like that anymore. When I was stationed at U.S. Pacific Command, I do 1 weekend a year to do all my administrative things, and then PACOM would request. It was very much a negotiated deal. When they needed help, I would combine my weekend drills into like a 2-week period and go in after my day job, show up at 1600, work through midnight, and get up in the morning and go do my day job again. But however, like during a couple of tsunamis we've had here in the Pacific, they'll mobilize the command center there, and you're literally having a couple of hundred reservists coming in, not just from Hawaii, but all over the country, staying in the hotels, working 12 hours on, 12 hours off, to supplement the active duty guys and give them a break. They're already working 12 hours a day up there at PACOM, and so we were there to supplement.
You know, Neil, when you think about the citizen soldier, I mean, the term citizen is the first piece of that. And when you think about citizenship, you know, that kind of, sometimes it's kind of tough to reconcile when you think of the kind of the way our nation was founded on personal independent liberties, you know, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness is very individualistic. And citizenship really talks about kind of community and working towards a common objective for a common goal, and working together. So, you know, my sense with the reserve component is, you know, the more reserves, the more people that are part of the reserve or the National Guard, the more they have exposure to something, which is the military, where it's all about the teamwork, working towards a common objective together. And oftentimes you don't have that in the private sector. So, you know, what are your thoughts about how the citizen soldier, you know, can expand what they know and the experiences they have and bring that to their own workplace? Do you see that?
I saw that quite frequently, actually. So friends of mine that I made through the reserves are coming from small towns in upper Michigan, in the Midwest, where there's not necessarily naval bases, or no naval bases, but not even military presence in the area in where they were. And they come back and they bring back their experiences, and you know, the community really rallies behind them. They can relate to the military because they know him or her. And you know, when you talk about, you know, different bases being spread out around the country, I think that was done on purpose by Congress way back, you know, 100 years ago. It was to ensure that the community had connections to the military. So that's why there's bases, I think, in just about every single state. Now you expand that to reserve centers, you know, a state like Idaho, I think they might only just have one.
Right.
But they're handling every single citizen soldier in the state. So these guys go back to their community, they're known for their service, and I think respected.
Yeah, I think that's important because, you know, I think it's like less than 0.5% of, you know, the general population has or will have military experience or service. And so the opportunity to kind of share that, you know, across the broader population is important. I mean, I think it goes a long way towards people understanding the service members. Now, while, you know, there's oftentimes a misperception on how the military is, you know, it's not all about giving orders and doing push-ups. In fact, oftentimes it's quite the opposite. Right. And so when you can personalize that, when you can attach the military to an individual, then you kind of can dispel a lot of the myths.
Correct.
And I think that goes a long way towards strengthening our nation, but also, you know, it helps the character of the individual.
Yeah, and here in Hawaii, you know, don't quote me on the exact percentages here, but it's about 1 out of 10 have served. There are over 100,000 vets here in Hawaii. So the percentage is in Hawaii is significant.
Yeah, and it shows. I mean, it definitely shows the appreciation that the population has for the military and the veterans here in Hawaii. I mean, that's why I stayed here. Right. You know, I had a choice at the end of my career, but that sense of ohana, that feeling, has really gone a long way, and it's definitely benefited us. But back to the sacrifice piece, you know, do you feel that the reserve component makes a greater or equal sacrifice to their active counterparts?
I'm a little biased towards the active duty guys. They're the ones that bear the majority of the burden, in my opinion. Yeah. There are reservists that raise their hand and go above and beyond what's expected to them, from them. And I know a lot of those guys, but you know, the operational tempo for the Navy over the last 10, 12 years have been significant, and I think it's the active duty folks primarily are bearing the burden. However, the way that the whole culture has changed, the reservists are, you know, an integral part of the team. That's the best way to put it. You used the word community. My experience up at PACOM was they were an accepted part of the community. Yeah,
I'd say the reserves, and particularly here, the National Guard.
Well, National Guard here
can't swing a dead cat and not hit somebody that's in the Guard.
Or well, the Guard is beyond respected here. They're just amazing what they've done.
Yeah. So we're going to take a quick break, but this is Jeff James with the military in Hawaii, and my guest is Neil Sheehan.
Aloha, I'm Kaui Lucas, host of Hawaii is My Mainland, here on Think Tech Hawaii every Friday at 3 p.m. We address issues of importance for those of us who live here on the most isolated landmass on the planet. Please come join me Fridays at 3 p.m. Mahalo.
Aloha, my name is Richard Emery, and I host Condo Insider. We talk about issues facing the condo association throughout Hawaii and talk about solutions. When you think about it, about 1/3 of our population lives in some form of common interest real estate. We broadcast every Thursday at 3 p.m. Please tune in and thank you. Aloha.
Aloha, namaskar, and hello. My name is Anu Hittel, and I host a show, Climate Change Beyond Outrage. In it, we go beyond outrage to look at solutions to climate problems facing people, nations, and the world. Join me every Tuesday at 1 o'clock Hawaii Standard Time. See you then.
Aloha and welcome back to the Military in Hawaii. My name is Jeff James, the host of today's show, and we have with us our guest, Captain Retired Neil Sheehan from the JAG Corps. Our focus today was on the evolving role of the reserves and the contributions they make in Hawaii, the citizen soldier contribution in Hawaii. We were talking about Neil's career in the previous segment, but I'd like to transition from your career to the citizen soldier contribution and community involvement here in Hawaii. And you know, Neil, you're deeply vested in the community, both while you were in the reserves and since you retired from the reserves and are a private citizen now. So what is it that kept you in Hawaii? And you know, tell me about some of your community engagements.
You know, I credit my wife for getting me involved. As soon as we moved out here in the 90s, she got involved in literacy programs in Native Hawaiian communities. She's been involved with hospice, foster kids, and now she's an integral part of the Make-A-Wish team. So she's always done nonprofits, community service. For me, my transition from active duty to the reserves, the last thing I worked on was the USS Greenville Ahimi Maru tragic collision off of Diamond Head. So I didn't get involved in the criminal aspects. So there was a lot of JAGs out there for that.
Yeah, when was that? Was that like back in?
It was February 9th, 2001.
Okay.
So it was,
15 years ago.
Yeah, 15 years ago. So I was winding that down. I did a lot of the environmental work, but I was the interface with the Japanese Consul General and then families of the survivors. I mean, of the deceased, I'm sorry, the nine who lost their lives. So I'd brief them every morning and night, and
that must have been tough.
It was very, very, very tough, and I became very close with those family members to this day, and the Japanese consulate as well. So, but that sent me to a social at the Japanese consulate, and I met the chairman of what's now known as Pacific Historic Parks. Back then we were called the Arizona Memorial Museum Association. Everybody knows us as the Arizona.
Right.
At the time, we had a couple of survivors still on the board, and now they're no longer there. We've got a couple of their sons, but I was recruited, I think, to lower the average age on the board.
But that's always a good feeling.
Right.
I don't get recruited that way anymore.
Yeah, me either. But it was a passion of mine. The history of World War II. My dad fought in the Pacific. My uncle fought in the Pacific. My other uncle, who's still alive, was shot down over Germany, and it was a real passion for me. And my passion was aligned with the mission. Sure. And I got involved, and now I chair that organization, now known as Pacific Historic Parks.
So what does Pacific Historic Parks do exactly? I mean,
we're the nonprofit arm to support the Park Service.
Okay.
Right? So we operate the commercial operations there, most of them, and the profits go back into the parks we serve. So it's not just at the Arizona. We have Kalapapa on Molokai, the national park there.
Yeah.
State Park at Diamond Head, we're assisting the state parks, and then in Guam and Saipan, the World War II parks out there. Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. You know, because I'm also a huge fan. I won't say a fan. I'm very interested and drawn to World War II history, particularly in the Pacific. I've done, you know, back when I was in uniform, most of my tours were here in the Pacific. And so I'm very interested in Pacific War history. You know, on my side, community engagement and involvement, I'm part of the board at the USS Missouri Memorial Association, and so
got a great relationship with them.
Yeah, so it's just, you know, it excites me every time I get the opportunity to do something with the Missouri or with the National Park Service. What are some of the things that you guys have done with Pacific Historic Parks? I mean, are there any big things that people would know you for? Because I don't know that that's very well known. And
You know, we went through a rebranding a few years ago, and I think we got to take a look at that again. But yeah, no, we give over $1 million a year to the parks, primarily for education,
Sure.
but the upkeep of the parks as well. And with their budgets remaining flat, we actually hire people to support the park service, just contract employees and things like that. But we started an education program years ago. We've brought out hundreds of teachers from all over the country for an immersion of World War II history in the Pacific. They go back, we pay for their airfare, we team up with UH, they get some housing there, professors, and it's a great program. They go back, you talk about community and reservists going back home, these teachers go back home and they spread the message into their classrooms. We've had video teleconferences where we've had survivors just broadcast right into schools in Idaho, Naples, Italy, all over the world. The kids are able to reach out and touch a survivor, ask questions and things like that. So pretty proud of the educational aspect.
Well, you know, when you drive down Cam Highway and you see the Pearl Harbor Visitor Center, it looks different today than it did the first time I drove down Cam Highway a long time ago. And did Pacific Historic Parks have anything to do with that? Because I thought the land there was sinking.
It was sinking. So the Park Service came to us, or we came to them, and then with Senator Inouye as well. And the building was at risk of being impossible to use. So we became the fundraising arm on behalf of the Park Service. So we did a national campaign with the help of Senator Inouye. We had a local board here. We had a national board that was chaired by Admiral Tom Fargo and the CEO of Northrop Grumman. And at the time, Governor Lingle was very involved. We ended up raising about $60 million and completely redid those grounds. It tripled in size. We were able to protect the artifacts. We did new museums, new visitor center, upgraded the theaters, and just made it a better experience for 1.8 million people a year that visit.
Yeah, that's
Arizona.
interesting. I mean, and so it really kind of goes back to, you know, the citizen soldier contributing to their own community. You know, it's not just about going and conducting a military mission, but it's coming back and, you know, when you live in the community, particularly for a reservist or a guardsman, I mean, they're entrenched in the community and they've got, I'll call it skin in the game. And, you know, you're a perfect example. And I would say that you probably, although your case is very individual, it probably represents the broader spectrum. I mean, that's been my experience with most reservists. You know, these are, I used the term citizen before, but I mean, I'll use a term I like to call them very solid citizens. I mean, they're just good people. And they love their country and they love their community and they like to give back to it. You were talking about some of the stuff your wife was doing with literacy. Can you continue on that? I think we cut you off on that, but that was interesting.
Yeah, so when we moved here in the 90s, my wife was saying, I want to be part of this community. So we did not live on base. It would have been easier. Our boys were young and small and instantaneously have friends. So we took a path to move out in town, rent a house on the windward side, and got involved with the community. My wife, Cindy, became very interested in the Hawaiian culture, started volunteering up in Waihole, up towards the North Shore there, on the windward side, and it led to just a real appreciation for the Hawaiian culture, and her service continued. And then, you know, for me, I was also involved with a charter school board. I was a vice chair of that board on the windward side. And right now at Pacific Historic Parks, there are times when I'm like, you know, we're all volunteer board. It's a significant time contribution, but it's a passion, so it's worth it.
Yeah, well, you know, you're talking about Pacific Historic Parks and you were talking about some of the Pearl Harbor survivors. And it just it made me think back. I had the opportunity a couple years ago and even as recently as this year, you know, to establish and form a friendship with one of the survivors, a guy named Brunner. His claim to fame is he was the second to last man to leave the Arizona alive. And he had to hand over hand from the Arizona to the Vestal, which was the vessel next to him. He was in a gun tub that was way up in the air. He was burned over 70% of his body. And so, you know, he came back to Pearl Harbor, I don't know, several years ago when I was in uniform, and I got the chance to meet him and form a relationship. And then he was back here just this year.
Yeah.
He said it would be his last trip back here, just because of age and health reasons. But he put together an oral kind of diary and story about what it was like back then. And that's his contribution. You know, he did his time. He did some time in the reserves after the war. But you talk about a solid citizen. So he put together an oral history of the experiences that he had on the Arizona during the attack, and then the service that he had afterwards. And when you look at this guy, he's 93 or 94 years old.
Amazing, right?
But you listen to him, if you close your eyes, you think you're talking to a 19-year-old sailor from 1941. I mean, it was just amazing. So, you know, it's kind of neat when you look back in time. You know, here you had this citizen soldier, and you fast forward to today, and we've got the same thing: people contributing, giving back. And you know, I think it's interesting, and I think it's relevant to kind of show the fabric of the military and how it's different than many people think it is. It's not just guys in uniform, like I said, you know, giving orders and doing push-ups.
Right.
You know, it's really changed, and the reserve role has changed, and it's grown. And so I think it just provides a richness that many people are not aware of. And I'm really glad you're here to help share that and to show, you know, whether you're a mechanic or an attorney, you know, you can make that contribution. And I see it across the board with folks. You know, I sit on the Missouri board, and so we've got you know, most of the guys are not former military, but they're just citizens that want to make their contribution.
Right.
The Navy League is the same way. You know, we've got a lot of volunteers on that board, several that were military, but a lot of just private citizens that really feel strongly about the military and want to make their contribution. So I'll call them citizen soldiers in their own right, and I think they're doing a lot in that regard. So what else are you doing besides Pacific Historic Parks? Do you have any other kind of community engagements?
Well, that's morphed into the commemoration of the 75th anniversary of the bombing of Pearl Harbor, a separate commitment. So that's meeting regularly right now as well.
Sure. I'll tell you what, Neil, let's take a break, and let's come back to that on the next segment.
Sounds good, Jeff.
So this is Jeff James with the military in Hawaii, and we're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back. Thanks.
Aloha, this is Reg Baker, and I am the host of Business in Hawaii. We talk about positive stories of businesses in Hawaii, how they have been successful, and how they have overcome some of the obstacles that a lot of us encounter when we try to have a business here. And believe it or not, there are a number of positive stories here, and we want to talk to all of you. So we broadcast live every Thursday at 2 o'clock, and it rebroadcasts again on Olelo Channel 54. So I sure hope to see you next time. Please tune in on Thursdays at 2 o'clock. Thank you.
Aloha, I'm Keli'i Akina, president of the Grassroots Institute. One of the things I love being, however, is the host of the weekly program on Think Tech Hawaii called E Hana Kako, which means let's work together. I get to interview movers and shakers in our town and across the world so that you and I together can learn and to grow. Please join me every Monday from 2 to 3 p.m. or watch us on the recording, www.thinktechhawaii.com. Aloha and E Hana Kako. Let's work together.
Pretty nice setup, huh?
Aloha, my name is Jeff James, and I'm the host of today's show, The Military in Hawaii. And we have as a guest today retired Navy Captain JAG Corps Neil Sheehan. And our focus today was the role of the reserves and the evolving role of the reserves, how it's changed over time, and the contributions that citizen soldiers make here in Hawaii. So we were talking about in the previous segments a little bit about Neil's past and about some of his community involvement. And we closed the last segment just kind of introducing the concept of the 75th commemoration of the attack on Pearl Harbor. So December 7th, 2016 will be that 75th anniversary and commemoration ceremony. And I understand that you've got a hand in the commemoration, you know, the formal committee that's going to put this together. So, you know, how did you get involved in that?
Well, it began with Governor Ige commissioned a committee chaired by Admiral Tom Fargo, retired Pacific Fleet Commander and
Everybody
PACOM
knows
Commander.
Tom Fargo,
Yep.
Admiral.
I still call him Admiral. I worked for him twice,
Yep.
one active duty and one as a reservist up at PACOM. put together a committee of stakeholders, the Pearl Harbor partners, we call them. So
Yeah.
at Missouri, Pacific Aviation, BOFIN, and then the organization I represent, Pacific Historic Parks. I'd like to think kind of began with the core group, so the leadership there, the board chairs and the presidents, the paid presidents of the organization. And then we also recognized a requirement, a need to have the community involved. So,
Sure.
you know, leadership in the hotel industry, the tourism industry, transportation industries, everybody that's going to have to come together to do this commemoration correctly, and with the proper, you know, respect for the people that will be coming into Hawaii to commemorate the anniversary.
So how many people are on this committee?
Oh, so there's about 8 of us on the executive committee.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Executive is always good.
And
Do you have cushy seats at the board?
no, we've got rubber
table
chicken
chairs.
lunches. Yeah. But again, we're all volunteers. Again, driven by a passion, shared passion. And then what Admiral Fargo did, he broke the larger 75th committee into subcommittees. So I chair the events committee. So my committee is tasked with ensuring that the events are properly advertised, and we've done a website. I'll make a plug for it here. It's pearlharbor75anniversary.com. And it's a common website shared by all the partners, and any monies raised through that website through sales of goods will go back to the parks. So there's an events committee, there's a budget committee, there's a hotel tourism committee, there's a transportation committee, and a marketing committee. So Hawaii Tourism Authority is real involved. They've been a major contributor. Each one of the Pearl Harbor partners have put significant funds into what I call into the middle,
Right.
to help pay for some of these support requirements that we have, shared requirements. Also the legislature, there's a grant process. It looks like we're going to get a grant from the taxpayers.
Really? Is the military contributing anything to this?
They can't contribute any funds or anything like that, but PACOM has got representation on the board. The Army has representation on the board, Navy Region Hawaii, and the Park Service. But it's just with the ethic rules and things like that.
Well, you would know. You're a JAG.
Right.
You were probably a legal advisor at some point.
Yeah, you know, it's there's our ethical standards, but they're there to advise us. But the military has been very clear. Whatever we need as far as, you know, the bands, the honor guards,
Sure.
the military has made it very, very clear that they want to be a part and be a major participant in
Well, is
events.
the ceremony going to be, or the commemoration, you know, typically on December 7th, you know, there's an event at the Valor and Pacific Memorial.
Right.
And then a parade in Waikiki, and perhaps occasionally if there's a deceased survivor of the Arizona, they get interred in the Arizona. Is it going to be basically the same thing? Is it going to be a one-day event, or is it going to be a broader because it's a milestone year?
Yeah, we're calling it the Commemorative Week. It's really the first to, we said to the 8th, but it's kind of being expanded to the 10th of December. So 1st through 10, and then the marathon this year is Sunday, the 11th. So if you don't have hotels yet, you probably should get some. It's going to be.
I got a house, I'm good.
Waikiki's going to be busy. No, it's much more expanded. The website lays out the schedule of events by day. There's a master schedule. It's changing all the time as we get more details and entities want to add something to the list. So we have signature events and we have other events. The signature events are going to be those widely attended events that all 4 of the partners are going to contribute financially to.
So can anybody go to any event, or are any of them going to be closed, or are they going to be?
There's going to be some that are going to be ticket only.
Sure.
Like Aviation Museum has got a great fundraising dinner during that week as well, and that's a ticketed event. That's for
And
the
does
benefit.
that fall under, is that formally part of the 75th
It is not.
commemoration?
It is not, but you'll see it on the website. And
Okay.
it's a great event, and people want to support it. They should. But events on like December 3rd, 6th, 7th, and 8th, you mentioned the parade, that's going to be on the 8th, and that's still going to happen. That's free, open to the public. December 7th, it's not going to be at Valor in the Pacific this year. It's going to be over at Kilo Pier on the Navy base. We did it last year. The Park Service wanted to do they called it a dry run for the 75th.
Sure.
Whether or not there's security concerns or number of bodies that can fit at Valor, I don't know exactly what the ultimate.
Well, the December 7th ceremony, it's typically open to the general public.
It will be.
This will be too, even though it's going to be on the base?
Correct. We're going to make.
Oh, that's great.
There'll be shuttle services. We're still working on that through the Transportation Committee, but we're looking at various different options, buses and things like that, to get people on. The President of the United States has been invited.
Really?
Yes, to be the speaker. We don't know if he's coming or not, but I'm told the invitation has been made.
It's kind of early in December for him. He's usually here a little later.
If it was December 18th, it would probably get him for sure. But
Yeah. Well, he's got his own private jet though, so it's like, transportation shouldn't be an issue.
it's for the 75th bombing of the Pearl Harbor, it really changed the world. It really changed the U.S. presence in the world, and now Japan's one of our best allies.
It did. I mean, it's very interesting that how former foes could come together so closely.
Yep.
And I mean, we were so interdependent today. And, if you go back 75 years, you would have never thought that could be the case. What's also interesting when you talk about the 75th, if you take it down to the individual level, I was telling you, I had the opportunity to meet Brunner, one of the survivors from the Arizona, and he, I'll have to say, I haven't met a survivor yet or a World War II vet who hasn't been able to just kind of get past it. Actually, I think I had a relative that couldn't get past it, but everybody else is just, they've marched on. They recognize kind of, here was a group of people defending their nation, we were defending our nation. At the top of our hierarchies, our nations, the governments decided they wanted to do things, and these people are just representatives of their government. But once it was all said and done, once the surrender document was signed on the decks of the Missouri, most of these people were able to kind of get past it. It might have taken them some time,
It took some time for many.
Yeah. So in that vein, do you anticipate? Okay, I'm sure there's going to be some Pearl Harbor and some World War II survivors that'll be in attendance. Although they're getting up there in age, I think there's still some left. What about Japanese World War II survivors? Have you guys reached out, or is there any formal program to bring them to this commemoration?
Not through our committee. However, Park Service will be working with the Consul General of Japan. The Japanese survivors, or lack of a better term, Japanese soldiers do come out. In fact, for the 74th, seated behind me was a Zero pilot.
Wow.
Yeah, chicken skin, right? He's an elderly man right now. However, he was there and to show respect. So it shows you how far we've come. Now, the flip side of that, the Japanese-American story is also critically important. So one of the events, signature events we're focused on is to properly honor the Japanese-American veterans from the 442nd, the 100th, and the MIS. So on December 3rd, right now we're planning at the Hilton Hawaiian Village, a luncheon, and all three of those surviving members that are able are invited, and it will be a hosted lunch for them in their honor. So that'll be December 3rd. December 6th, we're going to do something similar at night for the Pearl Harbor survivors. Everybody that's willing or able to travel are invited.
Well, don't do it too late.
It would be an early dinner.
Okay, there you go.
But companies like United Airlines have stepped up and are giving seats for people to come from the mainland. Some of our local businesses are giving up many hotel room nights, complimentary. And we're working on some transportation issues for them so they can get around safely and in a timely manner. So we're coordinating with the Arizona, Sons and Daughters of the Arizona, and things like that.
Well, it's kind of, a little bit sad because, several years ago, the Arizona Memorial association, the Survivors Association disbanded because,
Yeah.
there was relatively few of them, and they were so advanced in age and, incapable of traveling that they had their final hurrah. And I was at that commemoration ceremony, the December 7th one. I think it was in 2012.
I would have said 12.
I think it's 12.
Yeah.
And, and during that time, I mean, these guys, while most of them they were ambulatory to a certain extent, when during the ceremony, they were recognizing some of the units that had come under attack on Oahu. And when the host was getting ready to move on, one of the gentlemen stood up, very old gentleman, and he said, well, what about my unit? She said, okay, we'd like to recognize your unit. And about 30 minutes later, they had actually gone through recognizing every one of the units. Every one of those guys stood up. I mean, it was pretty incredible to see that. It was very touching, and to think that, okay, they disbanded the Survivors Association, and now we're at the 75th, and so even guys that cheated to get in and were only 16 or 17 are virtually 90 years old today. So this is really kind of the last hurrah, and so I think it's special, and I think it's a fitting tribute to what Tom Brokaw called the greatest generation. To give them, I won't call it a send-off, but to give them this kind of recognition when many of them probably will never get it again. I mean, I saw it might have been on Facebook or something, but it showed, a World War II parade recognizing World War II veterans, and they were marching down the road by units, and one of the units, it was just one guy. He was the only guy left. So it's
Powerful.
Yeah. So I would say, this is going to be a great opportunity to kind of give this generation kind of a fitting tribute to the sacrifices that they had and the experiences they had. So Neil, we're getting towards the end of the show. I'd like to offer you any closing thoughts on, what we've talked about, the evolving role of the reserves, and the citizen soldier concept and contributions that citizen soldiers have made here in Hawaii.
Well, thanks, Jeff. I really appreciate coming on. We did talk about how the reserves have changed. We're pretty much contemporaries as far as age and length of service and things like that. Reservists, when I first joined, we didn't see the value. Today, it's become such a core part of the mission, and how that has evolved. A lot has to do with 9/11 and need to be a force multiplier and things like that. So I'm proud to have served. I'm proud to serve as a reservist as well. If you would have asked young Lieutenant J.G. back in the 80s whether or not I'd been proud to have been a reservist, I probably would have given you a different answer. But today, it's different.
Yeah, it is. Every time you hear an F-22 take off, there's a 50% chance it's a National Guardsman flying that thing, because there's two squadrons and one's active and one's guard. So
that's a good point.
You make a good point. So Neil, thanks a lot for being here. We really appreciate you having you on the show. And again, my name is Jeff James. This is the Military in Hawaii, and we're on every other Friday from 11 to 11:45. Mahalo.